What's up YouTube? Today we are going to take a look at how to change your F-150 rear gear oil, as well as how to dress up your rear differential cover a little bit and take your truck from this to this. Let's get into another one. Alright, what's up everybody? Before we start, I just want to get to one very minor but very important detail. The absolute first thing you want to do, I've seen several of these videos where the guys have gone ahead and started by removing the differential cover and draining the fluid in this procedure, and that is about the worst thing you could do. If your fill plug happens to be so heat seized and rusted into position that you can't get it out, and you drain all of your rear differential fluid first and get it all put back together, and then can't put fluid back in it because it's so heat seized and corroded in place that you can't extract it, you are totally cooked. So as simple as it sounds, it is majorly important to make sure that you remove the fill plug first before you start this procedure. And so that's what we're going to do. Also, penetrating oil, even though I'm not using it here today, and a 3/8 inch braking bar as opposed to just a ratchet on a dry fill plug is going to make your life a lot easier. So off camera, I went ahead and gave it the brute force that it needed to start it. I haven't extracted it yet, and so I'm just going to go ahead and finish this process and removing this fill plug. Even though this should be filled, just below the fill plug, I like to have the drain pan in place just in case any fluid does come out, and none came out. And you can see here on my fill plug that there is a good bit of goop and metal shavings. My truck has 40,000 miles on it, but it is 6 years old, and this procedure has never been done. So those are the metal shavings that are present on my plug from the initial factory break-in process and all the mileage that's been put on it to date. And so the next thing we're going to do, now that we have our fill plug extracted and we know that we can get it out, is now we are going to go ahead and move on to the rear differential cover and start removing those bolts and getting the fluid drained out. So we'll do that here. Alright, so once we have removed the fill plug from the differential, making sure that we're able to get our fluid in, at the end of this process, the next thing we're going to want to do are remove these 3 retaining clips. You have 1, 2, 3 here that hold this brake line in place. Now before you do this, we are going to be removing the nuts also that hold the retaining studs for the clips. And so you're going to want to make sure that you annotate where those are located. For me, up here, you've got a clip that holds the brake line on that we will not be removing. And so the closest to that clip is a retaining stud for me, and then it's every other, so it's none, yes, to the right and left. So as long as I know that I put a stud back closest to that clip, and then skip one on the right, skip one on the left, and those are my other 2 mounting studs, no problem in putting those back in the correct positions so that we can mount our brake line back where it was. And so once you've made note of that, the next step is to get a 1/2 inch socket and go ahead and get your differential cover bolts removed so we can get the differential cover broke loose, drain our fluid. Alright everybody, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take a factory bolt from our differential and just thread it into one of these bolts up top like I've done here. And what this is going to do for us is when we remove our differential cover, it's going to prevent it from falling into our oil pan here. And so the next step is going to be to take some type of flat scraper and as delicately as possible, because we definitely do not want to nick or mar the face of the differential itself. That way when we put our differential cover back, we're able to get that tight seal and we don't have any leaks. And so we're going to go ahead and do that and get this differential cover removed. This bolt will hold it up and we'll go ahead and drain it and then clean it out. Alright guys, now that our differential cover has been removed, you can see how nice and dirty it is. And what we are going to do is go ahead and hit this with some brake parts cleaner and scrub it really good in a wash tub with some Dawn dishwashing liquid to remove as much rust as we can and as much grease as we can. And then we are going to go ahead and take a rag and we are actually going to get in here into the sump portion of our differential and we are going to scoop out as much oil and sludge as we can. And this is why you are much better off to do this process on your own than you are to take it to a Ford dealership and have them perform this service, because all they're going to do is remove your fill plug and take a vacuum and suck out whatever fluid that vacuum is going to extract. They're not going to remove any of this sludge and debris that is down here in this sump. And so if you can actually remove this differential cover and perform this service on your own, you're going to be much better off and get a much more thorough job than having somebody else perform this service and simply suck it out. And so we're going to go ahead and show you how that's done. And you can see how much of that crap's coming out of there. And I'd like to, for whatever it's worth too, use a shop rag, because they have a lot less lint than like a traditional paper towel does. And that's the whole reason we're doing this, is to remove any contaminants from the differential. We don't want to put any more in there by leaving a bunch of rag fibers and paper towel debris. And so that's pretty good there. You can see that no more fluids dumping out. And so once you feel that you've wiped as much of that out of there as you can possibly get, the next step that I like to do, you see a lot of guys use rags to put over their rear differentials. Again, going back to that thought process of leaving furs and debris, I like to use a paper bag, or a plastic bag, because it's not going to leave any contaminants. And so we'll go ahead and wrap this off and quarantine this off with a plastic bag, and then take our scraper and remove all of this gasket that's left on our differential. Alright, you can see here now what I'm doing is I have the plastic bags in position, and I'm just going to go ahead and take a flat scraper and run it around this differential cover, being as careful as I can not to gouge or nick it, so that our gasket can form a really, really tight seal. We don't have any leaks. And then once I have run my flat scraper around and removed as much of this old gasket as I possibly can, I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of sandpaper and I'm going to sand it up real nice and clean. And then I will take a rag with some paint thinner or denatured alcohol or rubbing alcohol, or just some type of chemical that you can remove grease with, just to clean up the face of this housing. Especially if you're using a liquid gasket maker, it's important to make sure that it is clean and free of debris and grease so that you can form a nice tight seal. We are going to be using an actual Mag High-Tech made by Lubricant gasket. and so we're not going to have any cure time on our process, and we're going to be able to just go ahead and, after we have this thing painted, slap that gasket on, slap the differential cover back on, and go ahead and fill it up with our fluid and get on with our lives. And so I won't bore you with talking through this whole process, and show you how I do it. Thing that I want to make note of really quick is, even though our differential housing has been cleaned off and wiped down and removed of oil on the sides of my differential here, which, you know, please forgive the camera angles, I can only do so much, but there is still oil present from when we drained it. And so even though the face is clean, if you are painting your differential cover like what I am, you're going to want to go ahead and get this thing free of all oil at this point in the process, because once you put that freshly painted differential cover back on, the last thing you're going to want to do is go spray and brake cleaner on a freshly painted surface. And so I highly recommend now, you know, cleaning up any residual gear oil that may be left on the differential housing itself before we paint and reinstall the differential cover. Okay, now that we have it shot with brake clean, the surface clean, our last step with regards to the actual differential itself is going to be to go ahead and remove all of our plastic bags. And then we're going to go ahead and just really quickly make sure that we just do one last wipe down inside this thing to remove any residual brake clean that may have gotten in there, or just contamination. And then once we do that, this will be ready to go ahead and put our differential cover back on and fill with fluid. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and take our flat scraper and our 220 grit sandpaper, just as we did the differential housing, and we're going to go ahead and give this thing a nice scraping and sanding to remove any of the gasket. And then we're going to go ahead and fill this 5-gallon bucket up with Dawn dishwashing liquid, or whatever your favorite grease fighting dishwashing liquid is, and then take an SOS pad to it and clean it both inside and out to remove all of the gear oil, as well as much rust contamination as we can on the outside. That way it's clean when we install it, and that our paint, when we go to paint this thing, adheres properly. Alright YouTube, our next step is to take our VHT engine metallic. I chose the color gold, and we're going to go ahead and liberally apply 2 coats of this material. I'm not going to waste your time and explain the dry times and things like that. You can read the can, but we'll do a time-lapse video. I shot a differential cover on a Mustang I had with this gold metallic, and it looked killer. So that's what we're going to go with here today. Alright, so we'll let that dry for an hour, and then hit it again. Let it dry for another 3 hours. Go ahead and bolt it back up, put our fluids in, and that'll be a wrap. Alright guys, real quick, while we are waiting on our paint on our differential cover to dry, one quick thing you can do to make your life a lot easier during the reinstallation process is take some type of pipe cleaner and actually clean your bolts. You can use a wire brush, whatever have you. I've got this, like I say, pipe cleaner here, and so I'm just running them through to remove some of the blue factory thread locker that was on these bolts, and then that'll make, you know, reinserting them a lot easier when you go to put the differential cover back on. Everybody, we are back under the truck. We have our differential cover all painted up, nice and shiny and gold and beautiful, as you can see here. You'll get a much better view once we actually get it bolted on. And we have our Mag high-tech gasket. I have another video posted where I talk about differential oils and the use of gaskets and my opinion on them, and the advantages and disadvantages. So if you guys want to see a real in-depth conversation about that stuff, definitely check that video out. I did a lot of research. Anyhow, this process is real straightforward. We're going to go ahead and hold the gasket up, hold the diff cover up, line everything up, put our bolts back in, tighten it up, call it a day. So we'll go through that process. So I'm in the process of aligning everything. I just have one single bolt in up top here, and as you can see here, this is super simple. I mean, it took 2 seconds. I put the gasket on the back of the differential cover, I lined up the holes, I took my bolt, I'm using red thread locker on all of my bolts, and all we're gonna do here is just line everything up, and then we can hand tighten all of our bolts into position, or at least get them started. The top one I was able to hand tighten all the way. This bottom one's a little bit more snug, but we'll start all of our bolts, like I say, using red thread locker, and then we're gonna torque everything down to 33 foot-pounds. And so I'll show you guys that right now. Okay, you may notice too that when you do your retorque, I just went in like a randomized star pattern, just zigzagging from one side to the next, top to bottom. You don't want to just work your way around the differential. You kind of want to work in a zigzag pattern, and then obviously it gets a little bit confusing trying to keep track of where you've been. So once you feel like you've tightened everything up, then go ahead and at that point go ahead and work your way around and then retorque everything just to make sure you didn't skip a bolt. And so once that's done, this is the beauty of the gasket. We're ready to put our fluid back in and call it a day. If you're to use some type of liquid gasket maker, there is a cure time and a process that you actually have to follow in order to make sure that you get a proper seal, where you have to apply the gasket maker in a specific way. And I'm not trying to make it sound overly complicated. It's just so much easier when using one of these gaskets as compared to a liquid gasket maker. I just wanted to briefly talk about the process. So you apply it a certain way, you torque it down so hard, you let it cure for X amount of hours, and then you torque it back down to spec. And then you also have to be sure to use the correct type of liquid gasket maker that is acceptable to be used in conjunction with gear oil. Because if you don't, you can have problems with the gear oil actually eating the gasket maker and then leaking. And so, you know, for all you DIYers out there, these gaskets, there's no cure time, there's no torque process, and you don't have to worry about picking the wrong gasket maker and having it not be compatible with your gear oil. And so we're ready, like I say, to go ahead and throw our fluid back in and call it a day. Alright guys, this is that part of the process. It's supposed to be easy, but never is, because gravity is not your friend. All we're going to do is open our bottle, remove the lid, remove the seals from the cap and the top of the bottle, cut the top of the spout off, and then go ahead and just squeeze it in. Once you see the oil start to overflow out of the fill hole, that's how you know you have filled it to the correct capacity. And so it calls for 2 and some change quarts. I've got 3 quarts, and like I say, it doesn't really matter. I know that 3 quarts is more than enough, so once I see the oil start to cascade out, we know that it's full. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Now I just want to point out for a quick second, you can probably see in the video that some oil is collecting on the rear differential. This is just me spilling oil as I'm putting the bottle in and out. this is not overflowing, you're going to want to see a steady stream dripping. And so this is our third bottle here, and hopefully this is going to get us to that point. And there it is. You can see there's a big difference between just a little drip from spilling and then it actually cascading out. And so this stuff is extremely expensive. You can see here that I am using 7585 Motorcraft. Again, I have a video posted that is dedicated to the different types of rear gear oil. I did extensive research on this subject because I wanted to run Royal Purple in my truck, but I was unable to because it would have voided my factory warranty. And so, you know, if you guys check out that video, I talk a lot about the different fluids and my conversations with AMSOIL, Royal Purple, and you know, the benefits to using different gaskets, such as the Mag High-Tech gasket that I just used on this one, and a liquid gasket like from Permatex or something like that. And so we're gonna go ahead and let this self-level now, put our fill plug back in, hit it with some brake clean, and call it a day. Alright, you guys can see here that we have subsided to a nice slow drip, and so we're gonna go ahead and put our fill plug back in. One thing that I want to make note of with regard to the fill plug is that under no circumstances should you put any type of thread locker on your fill plug. These things are so heat seized in there and corroded in there that you're asking for major problems if you do anything in the way of a thread locker. If you're concerned about any type of fluid leaking out of there, seepage, go ahead and get like a Permatex gasket maker that's made for drain plugs and put some type of sealant on there, but absolutely do not use thread locker. And so we'll go ahead and tighten that down and hit it with some brake clean, and that'll conclude the install. Alright, you guys, we are done. Everything turned out great. I couldn't be happier with it. Doing it myself obviously saved some money as compared to taking it to the dealership and having them do it. I also got a more thorough job by actually removing the diff cover and wiping out the sump, as opposed to just having a dealership put in a vacuum pump and extract the old fluid out of the fill plug, which is what they're going to do at a dealership. So, you know, I saved money and got a better job. And not only that, but I got to add my own unique touch to the truck, which is what I absolutely love to do. And so this gold might not be for everybody. It's for me though, for sure. I really love it. I mean, it stands out, and especially with my truck being all black. But you know, even if you wanted to do something more simple like paint it black just to clean it up a little bit, you know, doing it this way just gives you that opportunity to do so. And so the last little two house cleaning notes before I sign off here is, when you do this service, the one thing I haven't talked about is you want to make sure that you're on flat level ground. If the truck is nose up or nose down, that is going to affect the amount of fluid that you are filling in the differential during the refill process. So make sure you're on level ground. And then the second is, and I did talk about this throughout, but I want to stress it, just make sure that you are really clean throughout your process and you're cleaning everything thoroughly with brake cleaner, because if you have any residual gear oil on the differential itself or the axles, you're not going to be able to distinguish whether or not your service is leaking or whether it's old gear oil that was left during your change process. And so, you know, I was extremely meticulous on the fill plug side as well as the differential lid side to make sure that I cleaned everything every step of the way thoroughly. And so there's no gear oil left. And so now I know, you know, a couple days, weeks, months from now, if I see any seepage or anything like that, I know that my service is beginning to leak and I need to take action to correct it. And so, you know, I just really want to stress the importance of being clean so that you can tell that your service is holding up. And so, you know, I hope you guys find this useful, entertaining. Please like, subscribe, comment below. Your support is what makes videos like this possible. We'll see you on the next one.